Welcome to Direct Talk. Craig Hatkoff is a philanthropist who co-founded the Tribeca Film Festival with actor Robert De Niro soon after the 9/11 terrorist attacks in New York. Hatkoff started the international event in order to come to terms with the tragedy. He began asking himself about what led to 9/11 and what can be done so that such a thing won't happen again. Today, the film festival has grown to be one of the most celebrated in the U.S. for socially charged independent films. Hatkoff realizes that New York's Ground Zero has strong correlations with Hiroshima's Ground Zero. He recently took a journey to the atomic bomb city to understand how people can overcome tragedy. We asked Hatkoff what discoveries he made during his quest.
It's hard to imagine thinking of an event that can so profoundly create a crease in time for us at the personal level and at the global level. Clearly, September 11th was one of those moments that I could never have imagined. There's so many elements of September 11th that just are sort of woven through my life, but it asks the question, what have we done? But more importantly, so what are we going to do about it?
The 17th annual Tribeca Film Festival was held in New York. Craig Hatkoff is the co-founder of the festival and the Disruptive Innovation Awards that are also held during the festival. The awards honor people who are making positive impacts on society and disrupting the status quo, such as Jack Dorsey, the co-founder and CEO of Twitter, and Edward Snowden, a whistleblower who disrupted the world of security secrets.
We're a very different kind of award show. People say, you've never seen anything like this. We break all the rules. And what we try and do is take people who, of their own right, have done something extraordinary through the power of innovation, thinking about something differently.
This year, Hatkoff chose Hiroshima as the main theme for the awards, recognizing the growing tide of public support for the recent United Nations treaty banning nuclear arms. Beatrice Finn of ICANN, the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons, was awarded for her innovative networking methods. Hatkoff also awarded Koko Kondo, a hibakusha survivor of the Hiroshima atomic bombing. Educated in the U.S., Koko has long been giving testimonies around the world about her experience. Hatkoff believes now is the time to learn from Hiroshima, a city that also went through tragedy and trauma.
The notion of what Hiroshima must have been like really became something that stayed with me 24 hours a day, and I reflect on it all the time. After 9/11, which immediately took on the name Ground Zero, in my mind, there is only one original Ground Zero, and that is Hiroshima. Connecting the two was intended to be a way of saying, we have our individual Ground Zeros, but the world needs to have the tools, the skills, the language, the compassion to understand these other traumas.
Hatkoff was born and raised in New York. His father was a businessman who ran a toy store, and Hatkoff grew up in a suburban home. He vividly remembers reading a book during high school that deeply impacted him. Hiroshima, by John Hersey, tells the stories of 6 survivors of the atomic bombing, revealing the full horror of nuclear warfare to people around the world for the first time.
The one book I remember from high school was when I read Hiroshima. It was almost a transformational moment about not really understanding what our capacity is, both to create and destroy on this planet.
Hatkoff graduated from Columbia Business School and went on to become a successful real estate investor and a philanthropist. But in September 2001, there was an incident that changed his perspective on life. the 9/11 terrorist attacks. People in the US had never faced anything like this before.
And these were two huge towers. And it was hard to imagine anything could bring them down. They were a symbol of democracy, capitalism, all the things that we kind of take for granted could be eviscerated in virtually a moment. It's hard to put some of these things into words. You just don't know, and it's so... It rattles you at the deepest level, and you start to ask these questions. Who could have done this? Why did they do this?
To help revive the communities around Ground Zero, Hatkoff started the Tribeca Film Festival with his wife Jane Rosenthal and Robert De Niro.
The reason we started the festival was to try and bring people back to the streets, get some sense of normalcy. The original Tribeca Film Festival was really conceived as the invitation, as a return to whatever the new normal was going to be. There was not going to be an old normal, and there still isn't an old normal. So that became the organizing principle of let's get people to come down, let's get the neighbors, many who had not been out since the attacks. People just didn't go out. The area was, I imagine, in its own way, to a lesser physical extent, but what it must have been like after the dropping of the bomb. I think the notion of rebuilding until people see it, but people were looking for a reason to come back out on the streets. And what was going to be that reason that gave permission to start celebrating in a time of deep, deep grief and remembrance.
Filmmakers responded with stories that ask fundamental questions about the world, why these tragedies happen, and what we should do about them. As discussions deepened, Hatkoff remembered the stories of Hiroshima from the book he'd read in high school.
I hadn't really spent a lot of time since high school, really deep reflection on Hiroshima. It's obviously in the consciousness of everyone. But as I started looking into going back now, some 40 years after I read the book in the first place, what's happened, including what happened here on September 11th, had a whole new framing and an importance and a resonance for me that I couldn't even imagine. And understanding we're dealing at a very deep level of people's life experiences, tragedies, traumas, worldviews, values, and belief systems, we have to do this in a very thoughtful way.
Hatkoff became aware that Ground Zero was more than a symbol of hatred. He decided to go to Hiroshima and listen to hibakusha survivors directly.
I'm visiting Hiroshima, this notion of resilience, resurrection, and the human spirit was just everywhere. And this was clearly a man-made disaster, and we must learn the lessons. And that was my trip to Hiroshima, was people need to understand this, to hear the stories, and that's what it will take for us to really come together and say we cannot have these weapons on the planet.
Arriving in Hiroshima, there was one person Hatkoff really wanted to meet. Koko Kondo, the last atomic bomb survivor depicted in the book that had affected him so deeply in his youth.
Meeting Koko Kondo was probably one of the most, if not the most profound experience that I've had. And to really put a face on someone who had gone through this horrendous atrocity, and to see it so personally. She's a person. We don't think, most people here don't know people who've lived through Hiroshima, and to hear that personal story is just an extraordinary moment. The whole event when the family was on This Is Your Life. And I became incredibly focused on her relationship with Captain Lewis.
Good evening, sir.
In 1955, Coco and her father, Kiyoshi Tanimoto, appeared on This Is Your Life, a popular American TV show where they met the pilot of the Enola Gay.
Captain Robert Lewis, United States Air Force, who along with Paul Tibbets piloted the plane from which the first atomic power was dropped over Hiroshima.
And there in front of our eyes, the city of Hiroshima disappeared.
Now, you entered something in your log at that time.
As I said before, Mr. Edwards, I wrote down later, my God, what have we done?
And so, Reverend
Coco witnessed Captain Lewis, and she still remembers what he said.
I was staring at his eye, the tears just came down. Boy, he's not, a monster. He's a human being.
When she tells you her personal story of anger and, I'll use the word, which would be, hatred of someone who had done something so terrible, when she heard him speak the words that he had written down in his log after the bomb was dropped, "My God, what have we done?" Coco heard those words. As I understood her story, she understood he was a man, and he wasn't a bad man. And she heard his pain, his suffering, and she decided to forgive him. And to me, that act of forgiveness, I can't imagine anything in my life that comes close to that moment of forgiveness.
Coco was a main honoree at this year's Disruptive Innovation Awards. At the ceremony, recipients honored for inspiring social change joined together to plant seeds. The seeds were from trees that survived the atomic bombing of Hiroshima.
Their innovations are the seeds that they have planted. The flame from one candle can light 1,000 candles, and seeds beget more seeds. And we hope that these seeds will be the beginning of a new idea, a new movement that we're seeing everywhere.
When I heard about the story of the survivor trees in Hiroshima, which I did not know about, and candidly, I think not that many people, and certainly in my circles, are even familiar with it, it opened up a whole new context and framework for part of this journey. I'm in the business of connecting dots, and so the ability to connect the dots between September 11th and Hiroshima in a very respectful way just unfolded almost in real time. They're still living. They had died, but they're back, and you hear the personal stories of each of the trees and the condition they were in, and it was such a metaphor for life. We must all go out and plant seeds, and we may not even see the trees that grow or the shade from the trees or the fruits from the trees, but you have to start by planting the seeds.
Hatkoff visited the September 11 Memorial, New York's Ground Zero, with Coco. It was the first time Hatkoff had been to the site since the 2001 attacks.
Thank you for everything. You changed my life.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
I don't tell too many people that. You're the first one I've ever told that.
That's good. I'm so glad to hear that. Our hope is here. Yeah.
Through his journey, Hatkoff has come to this understanding. We must overcome hatred, strive for forgiveness, and never cause another ground zero.
The message is there. We are all interconnected. And this whole notion of we want our individual freedoms, but the interdependence is what makes civilization and learning to get along. In fact, what we have to make sure is the entire planet doesn't become a ground zero.